Assassin's Creed Shadows may have been delayed until March 20th, but that didn't stop us from going hands-on at a special Ubisoft remote preview event. We spent about 4 hours taking control of Yasuke and Naoe. Man, we have some things to talk about. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and here's everything you need to know about Assassin's Creed Shadows. If you're expecting me to spend the next 10 or so minutes dumping on Assassin's Creed, that's not what's going to happen here. This was just a preview event, and sure, we'll talk about the things I didn't like, but for the most part, we're going to talk about the gameplay, how Assassin's Creed Shadows is similar and different than the last major AC game, Valhalla. As you guys know, I have spent hundreds of hours playing Assassin's Creed and have made dozens of videos about previous games. I know this series and this genre incredibly well, and I have to admit, I walked away from my preview session excited about the future of Assassin's Creed, even if this is Ubisoft's last bastion of hope. Right off the bat, the first thing we have to talk about is the world. Feudal Japan is gorgeous, and talk about a completely different setting from practically everything else we've explored in Assassin's Creed games. Lush, vibrant, layered, there is no shortage of words to describe the visual aesthetic of the game world. There's a reason people have been wanting for this specific location for an Assassin's Creed game, and even though I only got to explore one zone, the world itself stood out. You have to understand that the world plays such a huge part in the AC experience, right? Think about the more RPG-focused installments of the game: Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla, and now Shadows. Each is defined not only by the characters, but by the world itself, with Odyssey easily being the best. Truthfully though, Shadows has a chance to top ancient Greece, and only because feudal Japan has so much rich lore to explore. Again, I only had 4 hours to absolutely blast through the prologue and an entire questline, but there were so many interesting places I could have explored, including castles with towering walls, village slums with people strewn about everywhere, and shrines that offer peace in a tumultuous time. As always, and I said this about Valhalla, the key will be variety. Here's the reality. Assassin's Creed Shadows map is big, and I worry that the team hasn't learned their lesson from Valhalla that bigger doesn't always mean better. Yes, in a 4-hour session, it's impressive, but if we end up seeing the same buildings, the same layouts, and the same patterns time and time again, it cheapens the experience. I don't know if that's the case, I'm just saying there is that possibility. Aside from the world, the second thing I was really keyed in on were the characters and the story. This is the first game where two different protagonists, Naoe and Yasuke, can be played at almost any point during the game. They are both real within the game world with their own motivations, personalities, and both participate in the game's story. What felt good was that at various points during the questline, usually at moments of inflection, I was actively given the choice to swap between the two characters. Both bring very different skill sets to the table, and I can't understate that enough, but more on that in a second. Because there's such a contrast between Naoe and Yasuke as people, and they're both written into the story, you get more complexity than just the typical back and forth that we have experienced in previous games. Of the story I did get to experience in my few hours, there is that classic blend of incredibly serious writing and characters, alongside more than a few ridiculous ones. I wouldn't say it's a departure from what the team has done in the past, but truthfully, I've never disliked the Assassin's Creed writing, at least the story that's told inside the Animus. Now let's talk gameplay, because while watching trailers and breakdowns is fun, there's nothing like going hands-on yourself, and we have to start with the two main characters. The Ubi team really cooked with this idea because Naoe and Yasuke play so incredibly different that it's almost going to be impossible to get locked into one or the other. As expected, Naoe is incredible in those stealthy moments where speed and agility are essential. She is the assassin, and some of her new tools, like her grapple, make her even more versatile than some of the previous protagonists. Whereas Yasuke is a samurai, a punch-first, ask-questions-later warrior that completely changes the dynamic of the game. Not only are Yasuke and Naoe good at different things, but they also have entirely different kits, and you really feel that when you're playing them. Yasuke wields massive weapons that are, for the most part, incredibly slow, but deal way more damage than anything Naoe has in her arsenal. On the flip side, Naoe only has a few weapons, but also access to tools, and while I didn't really get to experiment with those, it became clear that each character excelled at different things. On more than one occasion, I would try and take on a host of enemies with Naoe, only to be swiftly cut down. Flip over to Yasuke, and that same encounter felt a whole lot different. Skill, obviously a factor, but these characters are designed this way intentionally, and you feel that. Each character has their own skill tree as part of the mastery system, and as you acquire skill points by completing shrines and other activities in the world, you'll be able to allocate those independently. I got a great look at the mastery system checking out each node for both characters, and here's what I learned. Both Yasuke and Naoe have skill trees for each of their weapon types as well as a general tree. For Yasuke, that's the long katana, Naginata, which is the polearm type weapon, Kanabo, that massive club we've seen a few times before, Teppo, an early black powder firearm, and a bow. Yasuke also has a samurai tree which provides a well-rounded selection of active and passive skills to round out his loadout. Naoe, on the other hand, has a skill tree for her katana, Kusarigama, which is a sickle on a weighted chain, and her tanto, a Japanese knife. She also has skill trees that enhance her assassin capabilities, her tools, and a general tree called Shinobi. Unlike the massive sprawling skill tree in Valhalla, things feel more intentional here, which I am a huge fan of. There are certainly some passive nodes, but they're scattered amongst plenty of active abilities that you can unlock. Because you can slot 4 active abilities per weapon, and you can have 2 weapons equipped at any time that you can easily toggle between, there is a fluidity to the combat that feels a bit different than in the past. Part of that comes down to the combat itself. Like I said, both characters play differently, but this is certainly not the parry, instant assassination game of yesteryears. In fact, I find this to be the most involved combat system ever introduced in an Assassin's Creed game. Whenever you expose an enemy either by parrying a singular attack or a chain attack, or by perfectly dodging an unparryable attack, that enemy becomes exposed. You can then charge up your light or heavy attack to exploit that weakness for increased damage. It feels more like how an actual period sword fight might go, and while there's still a layer of fantasy to it all, it is more grounded. To be clear, Yasuke and Naoe have similar basic functionality. Yasuke can stealth and parkour to an extent, and Naoe can stand toe-to-toe with elite enemies, but they certainly have their strengths and weaknesses, and that's most apparent in combat. Now, outside of the combat, I got the chance to explore the world, and here's where things stand. Shadows isn't going to hold your hand the same way Valhalla did. You actually have to observe the world and infer the location of things from context clues. By pulling the left trigger, you enter into an observe state where points of interest are displayed in the world, but what they are remain hidden until you travel to that POI's location. Naoe does have access to eagle vision, which is incredibly helpful during stealth missions, but Yasuke doesn't, which makes sense, right? She's the assassin, he's the samurai. Overall, things just feel a bit more organic, and that feels great given that everything was handed to you in Valhalla. No one is expecting a Ubisoft game to hide things behind multiple layers of complexity, but part of the joy of a big open world is that act of, actually exploring it. And if everything is laid out to you with big arrows and neon signs, where is the joy in that? Shadows feels like it's dialed that back, and it's a change you love to see. My only hope is that that bloated filler content that was ever present in Valhalla has been dialed back as well. And to be clear, I didn't get enough exposure to the game in this session to really gauge that. So after 4 hours in this game, how do I feel? Honestly, pretty good. I know it's going to drive some people crazy, but Assassin's Creed Shadows is a damn solid game, even in this vertical slice. You have to remember, Ubisoft Quebec is behind the wheel on this, and as the team that arguably made the best Assassin's Creed game, Odyssey, this one, Shadows, is in the hands of the most capable studio in the Ubisoft portfolio. The bones feel familiar. It's an Assassin's Creed game through and through, but if you start adding up the differentiators or small changes to the formula, you can really feel that it's a more dialed-in game than Valhalla ever was. Yasuke and Naoe feel unique, and the gameplay feeds into their strengths and weaknesses. Weapon types provide variety in the combat while also being tied to unique active abilities. There's less hand-holding when it comes to exploration while still being accessible. The world is gorgeous, and you can tell the team relished in the feudal Japan setting. And finally, there's a combination of serious and silly storytelling that hopefully permeates throughout the entire game, defining interesting characters and creating those memorable moments. Friends, This is just a taste of Assassin's Creed Shadows, and while there's some good and bad, it's far from a complete review of the game. But after 4 hours, I'm feeling confident that the rest of the game will deliver. As always, we'll have a full review on or before launch day so you can hear our complete thoughts on the game. And of course, if you like these types of videos, be sure to drop a like and consider subscribing so you don't miss a thing. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.